they can install. In 2014, they were up to 966 students, 161% capacity. They had to move their pre-K program to another area, to another school. By 2021, they are projected to be at 181% capacity. Our land development code is creating a situation where we have under-enrolled schools in Central Austin, but schools bursting at the seams in the outer edges of our city. And because of that, that's because that's where families have to move. For decades, our land development code has favored the establishment and privileged in our community. It has led to a very inequitable system of how we zone and what we allow to be built. The move to the 10-1 form of government is a movement near and dear to my heart. It was a cause that I was very involved in. It was a strong and broad coalition of the have-nots in this city. We were the underdog, and amazingly we prevailed. Just like the 10-1 movement, we can't keep doing things the old way. We can't protect the status quo. We hear the word character a lot in these discussions as it relates to dimensions of buildings, the distance it is from a fence line, whether it looks like a fourplex or not. And that's not the character that I'm most concerned with. The character that I want to preserve for Austin is about people and about families. As a council member that represents one of the higher concentrations of families, preserving families in Austin is and has always been and is still a priority. About a year ago, as these discussions of Code Next were heating up and we were participating in the first draft, I was on a jog in my neighborhood. I was going up a street and I saw a family outside their home standing with their daughter in her quinceañera dress. And for those of you who don't know, quinceañera is like debutante coming out party for Hispanic families. They were getting ready to, what I assume, go to her quinceañera. And I remember thinking, that's the type of character that I want to preserve for our neighborhoods. Diversity, families, culture, that's the character we should be protecting. We can't talk anymore. We can't take any more time to change the way we're doing things. I hear time and time again, in fact, this last two council meetings, we heard time and time again from the community. We're tired of reports. We're tired of task forces. We're tired of consultants. Do something. The families that we represent can't wait. They are tired of having to rent, and they don't want to have to move out of Austin to accomplish or achieve the American dream of owning a home. We need to fix the code. We need a code for all Austinites, and we need it now.
Thank you, Councilmember Garza. My name is Jimmy Flannigan. I'm the council member for District 6. As Councilmember Garza said, our current code is broken. And the big ways that code is broken, we see every day when we drive in our neighborhood streets and we were forced to drive out to sprawl neighborhoods like those in District 6. But the code is broken in small ways too, in ways that we don't always see. The complexity of this code exacerbates our affordability issues, and it only gives access to the privileged few who have the time, money, and lobbyists to understand it. This code that we have today incentivizes sprawl. Sprawl is a symptom of this broken land use code. Sprawl is not just an environmental disaster, but it exacerbates the problems of our fiscal situation. When we sprawl, we force our communities to build new infrastructure at the expense of the parks and pools and roads of our inner city neighborhoods. We have got to stop a system that forces development out to the outer rings of the city at the expense of those who live in Central Austin. It is an unsustainable model. And as Councilmember Garza said, we have heard loud and clear from the community. We have to fix this code. We have to fix it for all Austinites, and we have to fix it right away.
Thank you for joining us today. I am Councilmember Sabino Pio Renteria, and I represent District 3. My district includes large parts of East and South Austin. It includes the neighborhood that I grew up in for over 67 years. I'm a native East Austinite. During that time, I watched our working family be displaced, and I watched my friends being forced to move away. I don't have hardly any friends left in East Austin. They had to move out because, a lot of them were renters. We don't have rent house for low income. That's why my goal had always been to do through the Homestead Preservation Act to bring in more people into, especially low-income renters. And we know that the only way that we're going to accomplish that is through density. You know, through Code Next, we're going to be able to accomplish this. And my whole goal has always been to bring back the working families back into my district, which is mostly where Mexican Americans. So that's what I'm here. And you know, I hear countless stories from those of us that are left, and so many have been pushed out that our school in East Austin are under-enrolled and likely to be consolidated, while schools like Blazers are overcrowding. That's a result of planning and zoning system that is broken. You know, I'm tired of having to fight gentrification case by case. You know, this is really draining on us, that we have to have these battles where every week we're fighting gentrification cases. And it's time we join to take actions together. District 3 has led the way in the term of preserving and creating affordable housing, but we can't continue to do it alone. As the saying goes, a burden shared is a burden halved. And I truly believe that if our 10 districts do their part, we can find real solution to our affordability crisis. So I'm glad to join my colleagues today to call for a code that would better serve all Austinites, not just the privileged few.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Casar. I'm proud to represent District 4, and I'm really proud to be standing here alongside my colleagues this morning. This morning is special because even though we represent very different districts, sometimes take very different votes, come from different backgrounds, we have a joint set of expectations and a joint set of demands that we will be asking for from any new land development code before it will earn our votes. The elementary school students here at Blazier and at schools all over the city will inherit Austin from us. And if we want the Austin that we leave for them to be better, then we need to fight gentrification, displacement, and segregation. We need to have the financial resources to provide them services. As Councilmember Flannigan mentioned, we need to be able to preserve their environment, and we need to be able to provide opportunities for getting around this city that are other than sitting in your car by yourself in traffic, by supporting public transportation, by supporting walkable infrastructure, and supporting just the opportunity for us to have mass transit in this city. And I will tell you that our current land development code is accelerating gentrification and segregation. Our current land development code is choking our ability to have a successful public transit system. Our current code is unacceptable. And the staff's proposed draft and the staff's proposed solutions have serious deficiencies in these areas as well. We cannot vote for and we cannot continue to support a system that is largely incentivizing McMansions near Central Austin when we could have smaller and more affordable homes. We cannot continue to support a system that is keeping working families and income-restricted units out of some of our highest opportunity areas, out of some of the neighborhoods where working people should have the greatest opportunity to live. We cannot continue to support a system that is not working for everyday Austinites. And so I'm so happy to be standing before this group as we move forward with this land development code process. The path that has been set out before us, the path that has been set in the past. I'm sorry, this thing is creating a lot of feedback.
Sorry. Hi.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
We're going to kill it. I'll say that again. Once the concrete truck has driven by.
Why is it going back?
Yeah, I know, right. Good question. Ask Delia. The path that has been set out for us in the past is failing working families in our community. And the path that has been set out for us by our city staff does not do enough. And so today we're committed to charting a new path, to fighting for a code that truly serves all Austinites and not just the privileged few. When I campaigned and when the folks behind me campaigned, we committed to fighting for our districts and to fearlessly fighting for what's right and to fighting for change. And I think that we have proven that we are willing to do that, and that we're going to be willing to do that in this process, so that we fight to chart a course that is truly rooted in fighting against gentrification, fighting against segregation, and fighting for things like public transportation, public infrastructure, and the public good. Thank you. And we'll take your questions.
Yeah, those are all our prepared remarks. So if you would, we'll take a couple of questions and then you can.
I got a question. I mean, who are you expecting to take this to? I mean, the current Codenex architects are obviously failing you, and I know that there's consultants from out of state that are working on it. There's also some people in town that are working with them, including former council members. I'm wondering who you actually expect to do the rewrite.
Well, there's a rewriting process right now. There was a lot of input for that first draft, and we don't know what the next draft's going to look like. So this is really a message to all of those people that we will not vote in favor of a code that continues to do all these things that we think the current code is doing. And so we didn't see a significant enough change in this first draft, and in fact, it kind of set up a system where there was still two Austins in a lot of ways. And at the end, they did try to address that, and they said they were going to bring us back a different version, but we just want to ensure that the public knows. I think for a lot of this discussion, many of us have just kind of sat back and listened, and we thought it was important for us to come out, let the community know what, we're not happy with the current draft either, but we do think it needs to change. So that's our message. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
I'm happy to chime in on that. When I campaigned for City Council, I promised my community that I would lead on Code Next, that District 6 could lead on Code Next. And talking to my colleagues behind me, the reason we're here today is because we are not seeing leadership for the things that we are advocating for. We are not seeing solutions reflected in the first draft. So what we are saying to the community is that we need your help too. We need to have a louder voice for solving the problems of gentrification, displacement, segregation, to solve our unsustainable economic system that's based on this current land use code. That's what we're saying here today. That's why we are unified behind building a better code, fixing this code for all Austinites.
Diana did the story, and we followed up on it because she did a really good job with it, talking about the online input. And you've seen the green dot map thing that was put out by the planning department, right, Codenext. And pretty much all of your districts were missing from the green dots, I guess. Like there were no dots in your districts. Is that an engagement issue, or is it this code doesn't affect me issue, or what do you think relates to why that?
I think almost everybody will want to speak to that one briefly, so I'll try to keep my comments short. I've had a lot of engagement from my district and from my constituents. I'm regularly at elementary schools, PTA meetings, neighborhood meetings, at the grocery store, talking to folks, and people are providing their input through this new 10-1 system in different ways. And instead of enshrining the status quo by hearing from the same people over and over again, we are here talking about the values that we are hearing from our constituents. And my constituents know, they don't have to see the map, they don't have to be familiar with the planning department, they know that the vast majority of development and population growth has been slated for this city on East Austin, where people are already facing displacement. They know that it's largely the more affluent neighborhoods that are fighting development and pushing it onto other communities. And we are here speaking from that vantage point. So I think there has been engagement from the council members here. There has those voices have been raised, and we've heard those voices. And just because folks aren't getting onto the planning and development website doesn't mean that those folks don't matter. It just means that the planning and development staff and the planning and development system is still enshrined in an old way of doing things that we're talking about shaking up.
I think just to clarify, Councilor, that map looked at the online comments specifically, and so one of the concerns that I heard raised from some community organizers was they kind of questioned whether verbal comments were going to be given the same weight. So would any of you care to speak to that in person, if you proceed?
Well, I think Councilmember Casar touched on that, in that even if we don't have our constituents going online and clicking whatever button and making comments, we still hear every day about the problems that they're facing. I had a town hall just last night where a woman said Capital Metro is not working for her, that it takes her too long to get to work, that if she takes the bus it's going to take her an hour, but if she takes her car, and you know, that is an issue that that if we had a different land development code, that wouldn't be the case, because if we had been able to build closer in and if we had been able to discourage sprawl, I wouldn't have a question at my town hall saying, how do you fix Cap Metro? So while, as Councilmember Casar said, while there may not be engagement specifically about Code Next and the maps, there is plenty of engagement that we all hear about all the time from our constituents. The symptoms that Councilmember Flannigan were talking about, affordability, I can't afford to live here anymore. This school, most of the parents have to drive their children to the school because we don't have infrastructure. This will be one of the first neighborhoods that can walk, and this one over here, they just got a sidewalk recently to walk over here. So these are all the effects of not having a good land development code. So we've heard from, while you won't be able to see that engagement on a Code Next map or Code Next, we've heard from the citizens, from Austinites, what they want.
And to really clarify, because I don't want to, is that I still think it's right for the Planning Development Department to change to get more electronic input from the communities that haven't had that input. But what I think is wrong, and what I think you have heard, is that because communities in districts like mine haven't gone and put in their honest input online, we should potentially halt or slow down creating affordable housing opportunities in West Austin. And that doesn't make any sense to me, because in talking to people in my community, they would like the opportunity to find a lower rent place near where they work, and we hear that every day.
And also in my district, we have contact teams, and we have neighborhood plans and land use plans. So we do listens to our teams, and by doing nothing, we were the first team that opened up and had secondary units, and we knew that we needed to do that in order to survive and stay there in that neighborhood, that we could rent out one of the units and pay our high property taxes. But it's becoming to the point where, we're the only ones that are doing it. We have other neighborhoods in the West Austin that refuse, or North Austin, that refuse to go that way, and we're paying for the price right now. We have secondary units. We have development that's going on that it's over $500,000 a piece, and we can't afford that. It's increasing the land value in our neighborhood to the point where, we're having to pay a huge amount of taxes. So we need something to help us out. We need more density along the major corridors that we're investing huge amount of money in through the transportation bond that we just recently passed. So we need to have more density there in these major corridors so that we could relieve the pressure from these neighborhoods where young professionals are coming in and renting our family homes, because they're the only ones that can afford to live together. They're 3 or 4 people per house there in East Austin, and they're renting these 3-bedroom homes, and these are young professionals with no children, and now we're paying the consequence by having to consolidate our schools and closing our schools. We can't maintain our pools, so it's becoming a big problem that we need to solve.
And I'll add to that, District 6 is the farthest from City Hall, and so one might expect we would rely the most on online input tools. But I knew that knowing the tool is there is part of the challenge. So in my district, we held 15 neighborhood meetings in all corners of District 6. And by the time we got around to it, there were neighborhoods that were canceling their meetings because they felt it had been sufficiently explained, and they knew they needed to wait for the next draft to come out for the next round of input. And this is also a question of complexity. If you take a 1,000-page document and you hand it to parts of town that don't have the resources, or the time, or the money, or the lobbyists to understand it, how can they even provide input that makes sense to them and makes sense to their communities? So the map is just one stage, and as my colleagues have articulately said, this is not the end of public input. I am listening to my community, I'm listening to my district, and I'm listening to the entire city, and will continue to do so all the way up until the final vote and beyond.
You guys talk a little bit. Code to do things that are really beyond the power of the code. I mean,
draft would look like that would suddenly open up whole neighborhoods to affordable housing. Do you think the code is capable of doing that? Essentially political job.
Well, I think, to be extraordinarily brief to that, if you don't have a hammer, you can't build a house. But it's not the hammer that builds the house. What we're talking about right now are the tools we need to solve that problem. And the draft that we've been given and the current code we operate under does not give us those tools.
You know, I'll just add, you're right, this is a very political issue. Code Next has turned into a very political issue. And the current system, it's a system where if you have the time to not go to work, and you can get all your neighbors and they can take some time off of work, and you can bring all your neighbors and you can come to City Hall and you can object to some kind of development, you usually get that. You usually, you'll get a situation where maybe the staff recommendation will be changed or the zoning won't be approved, and that's part of the problem. And so I have had concerns when people say, this is going to solve everything. It's going to make Austin affordable, because let's be realistic. It's not going to solve everything, but it is a tool to help streamline the process, make it more simple. There's always going to be politics in any process, but I think it's important to change the way we used to do things, to change the status quo. Because there are parts of this community, mainly the ones that we represent, that don't have the time. We were talking about engagement. They don't have the time to go to City Hall. They can't take off of work. They're busy raising families and making sure they make enough money to put food on the table. And so that's not fair. That's not fair that families that don't have the opportunity to come down to City Hall to say, don't build this development next to me, they get a different Austin than the rest of Austin. And that's what we hope the new code changes.
Can you guys talk a little bit about the timing here? Like what inspired this organization? The maps have been out for 4 months. We're like 3 weeks away from the draft 2. Was there anything specific that kind of inspired you guys to get together now?
Like I said earlier, I feel that many of us have listened a lot. We've been listening, the maps. It was a very, as Councilmember Flannigan hit on and everybody else, it's a very complex thing. Getting through the document, understanding exactly what it affects in your district and other districts, listening to what other council members, having those work sessions were very helpful, where we would only talk about Code Next. And so it took time for us to see what the community was thinking. And I think after a while we saw that it seemed like it was moving in a direction that was either keep it the way it is or slow it down, and we felt it important to make our support known that we support a new code that hopefully changes some of these issues, and we support moving along as quickly as possible, because people are tired of the studies and the task forces, and they want something done, and we hope to we plan to stay on the current timeline.
When you talk about displacement and justification, are there any specific mechanisms in the code or approaches that are currently in there that you can give us an example of? Like, what are you looking to see change?
So we asked for, the council passed a resolution, one of the few resolutions pushing the Code Next process, asking for something out of Code Next from the 10-1 Council, asking for fair housing statements on every major change in the Land Development Code, asking for how changes in our Land Development Code could provide more integration and less displacement. The city staff have not provided that with the first draft. And it's so critical that they provide it in the second, because it is, as was asked, right, the Land Development Code in and of itself cannot stop gentrification, but the current Land Development Code is accelerating it. If you look at our city demographers' maps for where population is slated to go in the next 25 years, it is so clear that it is away from most of the high opportunity areas and pushed on top of less politically powerful, lower opportunity areas. And so we don't even have from our city staff the metrics that we have asked for from this Land Development Code, asked for from our city staff how they've addressed impediments to fair housing that have been identified and turned into the federal government. We have not been provided with the numbers showing how it is that we can actually significantly increase income-restricted units and decrease the anticipated demolition of market-rate affordable units. The city staff have said that this will somewhat increase income-restricted affordable units, but probably not enough. To your question, Michael, the code consultants mapped creating missing middle affordable housing, income-restricted units, and they said that that was doable in several single-family zones. But they kind of arbitrarily ended those lines without going into some of the most high-opportunity areas. They know and have said that it's doable, but they have not pushed it nearly far enough to address the issues that we brought up. Of course, a new land development code in and of itself isn't going to make us get us off the list of most economically segregated cities, but if we put public investment behind land on public or behind housing on a publicly owned land, if we change our density bonus programs, if we push for more housing cooperatives, if we change impediments to fair housing in the code, then we can do everything that the city is allowed to do. It is up to us to do everything that is within our power, and then demand that other governmental entities and private actors step up to the plate to do their end.
If you don't get the code you want and you end up not being able to vote for it and it doesn't pass, how prepared are you to fight on? I mean, what happens if this doesn't work? Are you prepared to keep going until you get one that will?
Well, there are really two outcomes here. We either have the code that we are speaking about today that gives us the tools we need to solve these problems, or we continue to amend our existing Frankenstein monster of a land use code. Regardless, we are going to continue to fight because that is what our constituents demand of us. They want us to solve these problems. It is why we got elected to city council. It is in part why 10-1 even came to be. Councilmember Garza said it well. 10-1 is a way to change the status quo. And the status quo right now is a 30-year-old land use code. And whether or not we pass a new code entirely, as was called for in Imagine Austin, or we have to continue to amend a code that is broken, that will continue to be broken, I know that I will continue to fight, as will my colleagues.
And y'all, we were trying to wrap this up by 11, so we just have time for one more question.
I think you have 6 votes on that diet.
We hope this will help.
2 more people know they have 4.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Sorry for playing Jimmy.
What?
Sorry for the sound of Jimmy in the middle of that.
I sure did.
It's all right. You just owe me one, Jeff.
I'm in disaster right now.
Can I get a Spanish soundbite?
Yeah, of course.
Do you want to do it together?
She wants to too. So
Sounds good. I think you might have dropped this.
I so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
how are you?
I can hear you now.